I want to start, as so many people in this industry do, and get a little bit of information on how you first came into contact with cannabis. Do you guys remember the first time you ever smoked?
And I do. I remember the first time I smoked. It was in high school. So it was just a little party. I remember people hitting the bong, and I hit the bong for the first time, and I was like, oh man, interesting experience. And then I just continued on.
Yeah, fairly similar for myself. It was at a high school party in about 10th grade, the summer going into my junior year. I was pretty anti-cannabis up until that point in my life. And for some reason, I think I may have been drinking. I tried it, and it was a pretty wild night. And, I experimented with it on and off, but then I realized that, using it when not intoxicated with other things like alcohol could actually lead to a pretty calm and soothing experience. So I kind of stuck with it, and it's been a part of my life ever since.
Nice. Cannabis found you, and you guys have
exactly. Yes, man.
So, for decades and decades, and before we were even in existence, cannabis has been brushed to the side. We've been in the shadows historically. What was it like for you guys going from the gray market to a regulated market?
It was very scary and a very tedious process because the laws were kind of, they were laid out, but they were kind of vague. A lot of open-ended things that you could get in trouble for, couldn't get in trouble for. The ways you had to interact with other legal entities. But we found a really good lawyer and a really good legal team that kind of helped us, weed through a lot of the BS. And it was very satisfying at the end when you realize okay, all this work is actually matriculated into building a real business, rather than doing something in the dark, in the shadows. It's not, it's frowned upon, quite frankly.
And we know that getting a permit and going through the regulation process can be such a daunting experience. You say you got a great team. So what about mentors? Was there anyone there to guide you through this process?
No, to be honest with you, there were no mentors. There was nobody who was like, hey, if you do it this way, this will get you, this license, or this will get you qualified. There was a lot of trial and error. We had developed relationships with other distributors and other cultivators, since we had been in the cannabis market since 2015. We had a wide network. So, those individuals were able to help point us in the right direction for legal teams and for accountants and people that specialize in cannabis. But nobody at that point had it figured out to where you could actually hey, pay me to do this. So much so that we actually tried to do that. We tried to bring on consultants, and we ended up losing more money. And, then it was actually beneficial to bring them on in the first place. So, it was a lot of trial and error for us. And, that's why I think it's a lot more satisfying now that we actually kind of have established ourselves a little bit.
We were on a large property with four other businesses going through the same process almost about the same time. So our landlord did a lot of upgrades to the property that we personally didn't have to do, like bathroom upgrades from porta potties and things of that nature. So it was nice to be able to at least transition everything at the same time.
And so if you could, Marie, walk me through a day in the life of Marie. What does it look like when you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night? What is your schedule like when it comes to MD Farms?
So for the farm right now, the one project that I'm overseeing is a POS system. So I'm usually on the side of just operations offsite. I'm more of going through POS systems, and I'm on advocacy and working as an equity advisor for one of the nonprofits in San Francisco, and then just overseeing another project that we have going on where we're trying to get a storefront permitted in San Francisco. And we have a lot of other projects going on in my other business with Jess, where we're building out distribution and manufacturing in San Francisco. So day to day for me is just talking to a lot of equity applicants generally, and just advising them in different processes, trying to get them permitted in San Francisco. And then the other projects that I have going on. And then Alan is full on MD Farms all day.
Nice. And so if you guys could tell us, what are the core values of MD Farms?
Yeah, so I think the main thing for us is just being able to, one, leave the planet better than we found it. So we try to implement and utilize a lot of bio-friendly practices, from our soil use to, how we spray the plants, the things that we spray, we make sure we use any pesticides that aren't, okay by the state. Another thing too is we also want to take all these learnings and things that we have and obviously get paid for those things throughout, this journey, but also make sure that other individuals are inspired to do the same thing. So we do social equity tours monthly. Before COVID, it kind of put a pause on things, but we definitely made sure that we want to tell our story and kind of get it out there to people so that people aren't discouraged when they look at the daunting hill that there is to getting a license or starting a cannabis business. Like, it is very much possible. There's a lot of kinks and a lot of jumps and hurdles to jump over, but we are an example of that. So I think that's one big thing for us, is leaving the place better than we found it, not just destroying the earth to produce something. This plant's been produced long before we were here, and we'll be producing on this planet long after we're here. So we definitely want to add to that, but in the right way, and then also add to the community aspect of making sure that social equity individuals, people who have been disenfranchised because of cannabis, also get a chance enjoying in on this cash crop.
And are either one of you social equity applicants?
No, unfortunately not in the state of California. No, but we've definitely had our fair share of trials and tribulations when it comes to cannabis and regulations, as me and Maria are both from the East Coast, where, in most places it's still very much illegal and you can go to jail for, a very small amount. So in California, no, but working with the social equity program is something that Marie really has conquered and championed for our delivery service that we have in San Francisco, running the social equity program for that business as well as other businesses, and working with the city of San Francisco, developing their models for how they actually need to implement things when it comes to social equity.
I think to your point, like, we would both qualify for social equity in parts of Virginia, parts of Tennessee, and it would be interesting to even see if equity would come to those places without a lot of lobbying and lawmakers and maybe even the federal government enforcing that.
You mean those states do the right thing on their own, or you're going to have to put in a significant amount of legwork to get them to recognize?
Exactly.
Myself, I was arrested for cannabis, which is why the cannabis got started. So I should have taken a felony. I should have gone all the way through with it. I'm a cultivator right now, but we gave them all the money and dropped the charges. So, law enforcement business in and of itself, they have to support themselves. And so that's my 2 cents on that. Like many entrepreneurs, whether they're inside cannabis or they're outside of the industry, we all have one thing that we need: capital. We need seed money to start, because nothing's free in this life, and especially when you're starting something like a cultivation site, there's extreme overhead associated with that, not even just with the licenses, but just with the infrastructure. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what it was like for MD Farms to actually get up and running?
It was very challenging. And we're, still repaying some of those initial challenges from 4 years ago. We originally started taking money, loans from family members and friends, as well as putting in personal income ourselves. It got to the point where the business wasn't going well and there wasn't necessarily a light at the end of the tunnel. So we had to start using revenue from our delivery service in the Bay Area to actually keep the business afloat until it was able to become cash flow positive. There was a lot of learning early on, it's very hard to move to a very rural area and then try to build relationships and find, really trustworthy people that's going to now work in a new cannabis industry. When everybody thinks cannabis, they see money. So we very much got, taken advantage of in some senses by individuals looking to just take advantage of people who are investing into cannabis. But we, it didn't discourage us. We kind of kept moving and, figured it out as we went along. Having to renegotiate the initial loans that we had so that, we had more time to pay them back, but essentially, putting us in really unfavorable terms. As a consequence of that, Maria and myself have maintained 100% ownership of the business. So now as we move forward and we are getting out of debt and the business is getting more cash flow positive and about to turn a profit, we will reap the benefits of that, 4.5 years later from those initial shortfalls in the beginning.
Right. And one of the great things, like you said about MD Farms, is that, you guys have 100% ownership. So being arguably probably one of the only 100% Black funded and owned cultivation type maybe companies in the industry period out there, what has that experience been like for you?
I would say in the beginning for us, we were always surrounded by people that looked like us when it came to Prop 215 a little more, but once everything transitioned into Prop 64, we definitely were not surrounded by people that looked like us anymore. But we were so busy working that we didn't really even think about it. It was either, how do we pay these bills on the farm? How do we maintain the delivery? At the same time, we were trying to get the delivery legal, and we were originally in a city that didn't do any local authorization. So we had all these different things going on at once. And by the time we were able to really stop, or I know for me, by the time I was able to even stop and look up and see what was going on, that's when I just really dove into equity advocacy, because I realized there was no people that looked like us. It was didn't even really realize it until 2 years later, after you're building all these brands, all these companies, and you're like, man, every meeting that we take is with people who don't look like us.
Yeah, that's really pretty spot on. I've definitely met a lot of individuals, Black minorities, women, Latinos that have tried to get in the industry and have had opportunities to get in the industry, and usually what happens to them is they make a bad partnership, or somebody comes in and flashes money in front of them and get them to sign the dotted line, and then now they really don't own a lot of their company. Now they're actually working for somebody, but they're well funded, and I don't think that was their initial goal. And I think a lot of people kind of got into that place because of how expensive it is to actually kind of stay into this. So it does feel good to maintain ownership, but also just building out a business in general stuff, so let alone in cannabis. But then, at Marie's point, when you look around, the majority of people that have been hurt from this are minorities, people of color, disenfranchised neighborhoods, and I'm sure that goes around. But I think trying to spread that out, making sure that it's not just a group of certain individuals at the top that are able to benefit from it all. So we hope to take this and grow from it, and make partnerships with all walks of life, but also make sure that people understand that this is possible and it's not just corporate America that's going to take over cannabis.
We don't want these classic white Wall Street guys to come in that don't even consume cannabis, that don't know shit about the industry or about the plant. I always like to drop the emerald triangle. I live out in New York now. When I go to events and I talk to people, I like to drop the emerald triangle, and half the people know and the other half have no idea. And it's also, marijuana versus cannabis, which, some people still choose. They choose either, and neither is, it's up to however you want, the word you want to say. But, there are certain things that someone that has grown with this industry can recognize when they meet someone that's outside of the industry trying to come in. And so what do you guys think cannabis can do better? How can we as an industry be better to be more inclusive? What would you recommend to our followers that are actively asking, how can I be better?
I think one thing that's happened is this anti-stoner corporatism of businesses have come in, and it's been quite obvious if you look at the pitch deck or you just understand any of the ethos of some of these businesses that are coming in. And one thing that we all should do is just make sure we're not supporting that type of mantra, that type of business. If I see something, and this happened recently, where a really big company was coming in from outside of cannabis, had all these grander ideas, and they're like anti-stoner, we want to be the anti-stoner, this and that, and they were putting out a vape pen, and I was just so offended that that's the natural marketing take for a large corporation to come in. And one thing to my point is just that we've seen a lot of them fail, and happily seen a lot of them fail at this point, and it's definitely given some sort of ignited that historic, the people that were here operating successfully that understood the culture of cannabis and how we smoke and why we smoke. And it tends to just be an evolution and an emergence right now that we're seeing, that these new corporate companies, just because you have money doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Just because you can grow corporate weed doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So just continuing to support the brands that we know don't come from that is one thing that I definitely try to do.
Right, the legacy brands, the people that were here before recreation even came in, the ones that did apply risk, in their operations, the ones that, have grown with the industry. So in regards to your cultivation practices, because like Marie, like you mentioned, there's corporate cannabis, and the way I like to think of it is, there will always be a need for the Walmart of cannabis or the Budweiser of cannabis, for people like my dad in Texas that don't really care about craft. He just wants to sprinkle a little bit of it in his jar, and then there's the other side of the consumers that appreciate craft cannabis. We want that microbrew. We want someone that cares about the quality and what's going into the plant. And so let's talk about some of your cultivation practices. Do you guys, you have an outdoor facility, or is it a greenhouse? Talk a little bit about the cultivation site.
Yeah, so we have a 50,000 square foot mixed light facility. It's 30,000 square foot of cultivation flowering space, and then it's 20,000 square foot of nursery space. So we have 300 lights. So we mix lights. So we run lights as well as utilize the traditional greenhouse method of using the sun. We have a light deprivation system where we black it out at night, so we're able to get, continuous harvest throughout the year, not just relying on the sun and daylight savings time when plants naturally go into harvest in the fall. We have a custom fertilizer blend, so we stay away from commercial nutrients. We have a specialist that comes in and tests our water and our soil and our runoff readings. We don't come from years and years of traditional cultivating where people have had to figure out things and not necessarily have all the resources allowed to them as any other commodity. So we don't necessarily know a lot of the old tricks of the trades. We've kind of been figuring this out in a super compliant manner for the last 4 years. So it's been one benefit that we have, whereas I know a lot of individuals they kind of go back to their old ways because they know this helps this or this works better this way, but it's not necessarily something that's compliant or that would pass lab testing or the state standard. We like to keep it basic and simple. We have our SOPs are reevaluated every couple of months just to make sure we're operating at maximum capacity for our space and not really missing a beat, because at this level every dollar counts. So we're just trying to make sure we cut costs where we can, but also not hurting the plant or the product.
And so when it comes to strain selection, how do you guys go about that? What strains are you growing? Have you noticed trends in sales from your strains? Talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So generally we like to grow more majority indica hybrids, exotic strains. Right now, some of the popular strains we're growing are wedding cake and London pound cake, ice cream cake, peanut butter souffle. We've learned in the valley that we're in, a lot of strains don't do necessarily well. OG strains don't do well for us. There's a lot of high humidity in this area, and those are more susceptible to powdery mildew and mold. So we kind of stay away from those, just with the understanding that we won't be able to maximize the space or get the top market dollar for those. So we try to stay within the range that we know we'll be able to maximize every dollar for the product that we're producing. We're constantly pheno hunting, popping new seeds, popping new strains. It's a little project that some of our growers take on. It takes about a year to be able to get an actual strain that you like into production to produce 10 to 15,000 clones of it, so that you can actually fill your facility with it. And that's a lot of testing and trial runs and getting lab tests, and then not changing up your recipe for any one strain, but trying to make sure you cater to the ones that are the best and most demand. So we like to stay exotics. So we have a light depth facility, so the product's a little better than outdoor and greenhouse facility, about right under indoor quality product. So we like to stay with exotic indicas. I think it's probably the best for our facility.
Very nice. And Marie, I think you mentioned at the beginning of the interview something about having a distribution company. Is that a part of MD Farms? Can you talk a little bit about how you guys are making it to market?
Yeah, so Legacy Coterie is the name of it, and it's an extension of MD Farms. We also have a distribution permit in Salinas, so it just depends on the brand, the customer, why we're going to move it around. But we've created this company specifically to help broker bulk product and do secured storage and distribution for equity brands. So the goal is basically for us to source a couple 100 pounds at a time of all different types of flour, and then take that, create brands for at least 3 to 5 different equity products, and then help them distribute those products into retailers that Jess has relationships with, we have relationships with, the equity brand has relationships with. So our idea is just to streamline the process, and as well as brokering trim for our manufacturer and some hash as well. So we're kind of just dealing with all of the people that we saw that we know are really talented, and trying to figure out how we can help them build brands and create businesses that they were already doing in the legacy type of aspect in the compliant aspect. So that's the ultimate goal. And now that we have Claire working with us, that was head of sales for a handful of really notable companies. So we're helping build strategic sales plans and other different large scale strategy planning for companies that want to get started into the industry, whether they're small or large, but just bringing in all of the knowledge that we have to help guide them and consult them.
Excellent. Well, that's really good to hear. It sounds like you guys have a pretty clear path. I know distribution and sales is tough for a lot of brands, and making it on that shelf space is another challenge. And now with the pandemic, the retail environment has changed. A lot of people for the first time are ordering online. They're doing pickup. They're phasing out that interaction. And so, cannabis has come a long way, and we still have so much more to go. Where do you guys see the industry in 5 years?
It's almost twofold. Like, if it federally gets descheduled, we have one completely different path versus if we just stay streamlined in the California state-to-state marketplace like we have. I kind of see it finally going federally legal and allowing for true distribution state-to-state, where people in New York really want that emerald weed. We're actually able to use the viability of all the beauty and the way that we cultivate out here can actually be shown and broadcast all over the country. That would be like one thing that I would love to see. But at the same time, as we know, if it's federally legal, then that's going to put a lot of small businesses out of business again. It's definitely a catch-22 of how they're going to deschedule it or reschedule it, what that's going to do for California being the largest player in cannabis and will continue to be. So it would really benefit us to be that third-party distribution when they finally allow like alcohol to kind of open up. But I mean, it's just I don't know what the federal government is going to do, especially now with all the tax revenue being lost with everything going on in COVID. But it's definitely an interesting future, and hopefully before that happens and before it's federally legal, then we also still have to address a lot of cities and states passing policy that addresses the war on drugs, no matter what the federal government does. So to me, that's really important. Just like if a city like Nashville wants to make money on weed, equity programs should be created.
I see it being pretty wide open. I mean, I think the pandemic has shown that there are needs for more tax revenues that need to be generated, that, when you can't tax restaurants and you can't tax normal businesses, when the housing market is the way it is, I think cannabis is, it's going to open itself up as a savior to the economy in a sense. I also think that more people are smoking cannabis now and are educated more now than they ever have been. So I think when it comes to the voting over the next 5 years, I think people are really going to be going to their elected officials and really demanding, like, look, why can't we balance our budget? Why can't we give our teachers a raise? Why are we, short here when we could literally simply tax this one commodity and be able to take care of a lot of those issues? So I see that as a highlight and as a benefit for people in the industry. And then to Marie's point, it's also going to be very detrimental if it's not done the appropriate way. It'll just open up a lot more problems and issues, and then it'll just be a lot of back and forth. So my hope is that that the people at the top are listening to the people that are actually fighting so diligently to make sure that everybody has an equal seat at the table, and they don't just do a backroom type of deal and just pass some laws and get things done, and it looks good for the headlines, but when you actually get down in the weeds and look at the bills and what's passed, it doesn't help anybody but people that are actually in the business. So we fight and hope that that's not the case, but I think it's going to be a tough road either way. But I think cannabis is on the verge of opening up really big across this country.
if you could think back to your first smoking experience to right now in this interview, what has been your favorite memory along this cannabis journey?
I think my favorite memory was the first cup that Marie and myself did. It was in 2017, I believe, maybe 2016. It was in San Francisco. I can't remember which cup it was, but we set up our stage in our little area, and we had our delivery service for about a year then. And, we were selling products and trying to get new clientele, trying to get people to sign up because that was our delivery area. Where a lot of people coming down from up north and a lot of people come from up, down south and just really trying to sell product. Our main goal was to try to get more patients. We get more patients signed up, we can have more products, we can grow products, and that's our area. And then we had some really, really rare strains at the time. I think it was actually the Mochi cut when it just came out. And we had about a half pound of it. And literally there was a line from our table all the way down the hallway because everybody, when they found out that we actually had that strain, they all wanted to buy it. And so, people from other stands are like, what is everybody getting over here? Why are they standing in line? Explain to them we had this, this cut. And we sold out in a couple hours. It was a really surreal experience. It was like, wow, this is actually the possibilities of California cannabis. And then at that point, I think I'd lived in California full time for a year, so I was still just getting the experiences of the legalization of cannabis and how it worked out here. So it was pretty cool.
And you, Marie, what's been your favorite experience along this journey?
Honestly, it's all definitely like a up and down, totally new experiences all the time, which I love. I would say because I'm not on the farm all the time, probably the most mesmerizing thing to me is truly the farm, because we didn't come from growing. I grew 2 plants in my closet. We had a couple small indoors in Modesto with someone else, but we never, we took on 30,000 square feet before we ever had a 10 lighter. So when you think about that, and then of course, all the many, understanding you do, having an underfunded cultivation is one of the silliest things you could ever do, but us overcoming everything that we ever did there. We've gone through 4 different growers. Just all the process and still seeing it get better and better every single time that I'm there. And just for me, if you would have told me, Marie, you're gonna have, 50,000 square feet world-class cultivation facility, I would have said you're lying. If you would have told me you'd have 20 dispensaries, I would say, yeah, that sounds like me and my brother. We'll have 20 dispensaries. But when you say all this cultivation where we've just developed so many relationships and learned so much and really understood, that is truly the nut of our business, is understanding how to control the supply chain and controlling production at some point, and vertical integration and horizontal. Everything really filled out a lot more as far as all the vertical integration once we had solidified cultivation. But truly for me, it's the most mind-blowing thing that we've done, because it's nothing that we were ever familiar with. We just knew really, really good weed, and we knew we wanted to grow really, really good weed, and everything else we were just gonna figure out.
I love it. Commit first and then figure it out later. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being with us. If people want to find you guys online, where can they go?
Our Instagram, mdfarms.ca, is where they can find us.
Okay, guys.
Thank you for your time. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye, guys.